We are most definitely into November college football 2025. My name is Mark. I appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We're here every night. We've been here since conference media days back in July, every night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Monday, right here at SC1 Sports, Voice of College Football. Then we get on over to the main channel for the rest of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday with all of you. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We will get to the phone lines as well. I believe we've got Steve Helwick standing by from SB Nation to break down what's going on in the American Conference this weekend and the playoff consideration out of the group of five. So hopefully we'll have that discussion tonight. And big day in college football, of course, on Tuesday, because the first unveiling of the college football playoff rankings will be on Tuesday night. I'll have to look up to see exactly when that will take place. So that is typically 7 or 8 o'clock Eastern time. And what we've done in the past is go live during the rankings reveal, and then obviously take your calls and respond for the rest of the night. And one of these nights, whether that's going to be on this Tuesday or in the next couple weekends, the next couple Tuesdays, of course, ESPN has their doubleheader basketball from Madison Square Garden, where they go and do the unveiling during halftime. I believe it's during halftime. So I don't know which week that is, but then that throws off the whole timing of trying to set up a show around that, because of course you don't know when halftime is going to be of a basketball game. But we'll deal with that when we get there, because we've done this once or twice or 10 times or so. All right, folks, do appreciate you being here. We're getting some calls coming in, so let's get right to it. Again, we do believe Steve Helwick stopping by tonight from SB Nation, Hustle Belt, and Underdog Dynasty to break down the American Conference and the Mountain West Conference and the possible scenarios involving those teams for the group of five slot. But in the meantime, we go to your calls. And before we do, the Amazon links in the description section of this video and all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. It's the same shopping experience. So take everything that you do when you shop on Amazon, and if you use our link, you will not be able to tell you are using our link. It will instantaneously convert to your account and treat it exactly the same way. So that's what you got. All right. We did have DeReal MVP lined up, but I believe we're going to, DeReal MVP's here. There he is. He popped in and out, and there he is, our first caller of the night.
Hey,
DeReal,
Mark.
what's going on?
How are you doing this evening?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing well. We got a lot of chaos that happened last week, which is going to make the college football playoff race interesting and the rankings interesting. I'm really curious about where Georgia Tech's going to be. I'm really curious about Miami Notre Dame. I've got a feeling Notre Dame is going to be placed ahead of the Miami Hurricanes despite the head-to-head result on the field. Heather Dinich, I saw on ESPN today, talked about the trajectory of Miami Notre Dame, which I believe she has, I believe she knows things that we don't know. I don't think she just says things on television for the sake of saying things, in my personal opinion. So I'm interested in that. And I'm interested to see the BYU Texas Tech, where they're ranked at, because I want to see how much respect the Big 12 is getting compared to the lower ranked 1 loss and the top ranked 2 lost SEC team.
And that's a good discussion right there for sure. Why don't we do this? We'll keep you on here, DeReal, but we got our first guest here. We got Steve Helwick stopping by from SB Nation. So maybe we'll have Steve chime in on his anticipation of the rankings, and then we're going to slide Steve in to talk about the American Conference and the Mountain West in the group of five. Steve, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you too.
And so you've got what games covered this weekend? What's on your docket?
Oh, yeah, I just did a triple header with UTSA, Tulane on Thursday, Rice, Memphis on Friday, and Houston, West Virginia on Saturday. This week, I am flying across the country to Florida. I'm doing South Florida, UTSA on Thursday, and UCF Houston on Friday for the Space Game, which is an incredible tradition UCF has with the uniforms, and they always dominate those games too. I mean, if you think back to Oklahoma State when they made the Big 12 title game a few years ago, they lost that game 45-3. So that'll be a fun atmosphere there in Orlando.
So again, DeReal, you're looking at the Miami Notre Dame dynamic because obviously Notre Dame looks like a better team right now, and Miami is just, imploding. But they've got the head-to-head. You're looking at the Big 12 respect factor with Texas Tech looking good most of its games, and BYU obviously being an undefeated team, and how many one-loss teams are going to be ahead of them. And what other point did you have to make about the rankings?
The final one I'll make to throw this in interesting. I believe James Madison out of the Sun Belt, I believe it is, has a legitimate chance to make the college football playoff right now. I wouldn't have said it a week ago, but with Tulane losing on the road and a very bad loss, I think James Madison has a good shot. So I want to see if they're ranked.
So, Steve, what are your thoughts about the first CFP rankings and when you're looking out for?
Well, one I'll just touch on is James Madison point. If you watch that Louisville game, that was a much closer game than that 28-14 score suggested. And then Louisville, their only loss this year is an overtime loss to Virginia. So that's a quality loss. James Madison doesn't really have a win better than Old Dominion, but they've been really beating up on opponents. They beat Old Dominion 63-27. They just beat Texas State 52-20. They're really hitting on both sides of the ball, and that is a very good defensive front that they have there. And even losing guys like Eric O'Neal to Rutgers, they've reloaded really well this season. But other thoughts on the rankings, it was mentioned about the Big 12 teams earlier. I think that Utah getting, 16 or 17 in the AP poll is absolutely ridiculous when you consider that Utah has 7 wins by 25 or more points this year. And some of those wins include 6-win Arizona State and 7-win Cincinnati. I think Utah should be closer to the top 10 for what they've done. And you look at their losses, BYU and Texas Tech. BYU's undefeated. Texas Tech right now is number 1 in point differential. They've dominated. I think all their wins are by 23 or more points, and their only loss is to an Arizona State team where they didn't have Baron Morton, and they lost in the last minute of that game on the road. So I think that Texas Tech needs a lot more respect, and they should be a lot closer to the top 5, if not in the top 5 when these rankings are released. So I do think that the Big 12 needs some more respect, and I'm hoping that the committee fixes the AP pool's flaws in that regard.
So, DeReal, you kind of caught me on a catch-22 a couple weekends ago. So I veered away from head-to-head and sticking strictly to my formula that I've used for years and years and years and years, because it usually breaks down by now. It usually can't be adhered to, so I get away from the head-to-head. But I went back to it after you called me on the carpet, and and that's what's curious about this is we've got a lot of head-to-head, as we always do, but Steve, if you look at the rankings, and I'll have both of you guys comment on this because it really boxes you in, as it did with my rankings this week. If you adhere to the head-to-head, you have to keep Miami ahead of Notre Dame. You have to keep Louisville ahead of Miami. And now Miami's got 2 losses, so that it's not difficult. But thus, you keep Louisville ahead of Notre Dame. Thus, you keep Virginia ahead of Louisville, who's ahead of Notre Dame and Miami. And it creates those kind of scenarios in which it really boxes you into a situation. So at what point, I'll start with you, Steve, do you honor the head-to-head, or do you start to override it with maybe a better overall resume?
I've ranked 1 through 136 every week of the season. At the beginning of the season, I put a lot of weight into head-to-head. Less as time goes on to the year. A famous example, I would say, is 2014. I was advocating TCU over Baylor in that, even though Baylor had the head-to-head, because I thought TCU was beating opponents better. They had the better non-conference wins than Baylor in that year. They didn't lose by 14 to an average West Virginia team. So I actually sided with TCU that year. So I think there is a time that you have to dump the head-to-head, because how far are you going to extend it? Because you mentioned those specific head-to-head scenarios. What about SMU, which is 6-3, has the same number of wins as Miami? Are you going to put them there? Then do you have to put TCU above? So it has to end at some point. So you kind of just have to focus on the resume as a whole. I think one thing you have to look for is losing close versus losing blowout losses. One thing advantage that Miami has right now is they could have won both of their losses. They were close games. So I think that gives them some advantage. Notre Dame also, I think their 2 losses are by a combined 4 points this year. So I do think that when you're losing close games, that does kind of help you more in my rankings than necessarily head to head. I try to look for the better overall resume because head to head, it has to end at some point.
Well, DeReal, before you go, I would say that you get out of the situation with SMU and Miami because Miami simply has a better record, 6-2 versus 6-3. So you don't have to honor the head-to-head in the way I look at it. And then in regards to, absolutely, you got to look at performance. This is not the NFL where we just line up standings and we're done. Yeah, absolutely. If you're losing to, I actually think there comes a point when you're talking about mid-tier teams, let's say in the Big Ten and the SEC, it is to their credit when they lose a game but play extremely well. I think going out, let's say if Notre Dame was otherwise, or Miami would have been able to continue to stay undefeated, would have finished undefeated and been one of the top 5 teams in the country. Notre Dame playing at Miami, going to the last play of the game and losing that close, that is a more credible performance than going out and beating Stanford by 3 touchdowns. I think that just proves your quality, even though you lost the game, more so than just beating up on nobody.
I feel that way with Iowa against Indiana right now. I think that considering what Indiana's done to everybody else, the fact that Iowa had that game tied with under 2 minutes left, missed a field goal late in that game, which would have put them ahead. I think that is a huge credit to Iowa, what they were able to do against Kurt Cignetti's team.
And played the fourth quarter without Mark Gronowski, their starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think this is where you got to look at beyond just the record. You got to look at the performance metrics, and you got to use a bunch of formulas to dissect your own interpretation to determine like performance, strength of record, strength of schedule, and all that stuff needs to be included as well.
DeReal, did you have anything else, sir?
What I was going to ask is, where do you think if BYU loses this game, because I think they're like a touchdown underdog against Texas Tech, I'm worried that they're going to suffer the same fate Georgia Tech did in the AP poll, where they're just going to absolutely plummet because of how weak their strength of schedule, strength of record is going to be, especially if they get creamed. Do you expect them to drastically tumble, maybe like even out of the top 20 if they lose this game bad?
Steve, I'll let you take that on, then I'll give you my thoughts.
It depends. I mean, Texas Tech has beaten a lot of teams. They beat Utah by 24 on the road, even though that game was a bit more closer than the final score suggested. I don't know. BYU has a really good resume so far. That win over Utah was really impressive. I know they had to do that escape of Arizona on the road, but here's the thing. Alabama had to do the same thing against South Carolina, and I think a lot of people would say Arizona's same caliber, if not better than South Carolina, being 5-3 right now. So there are a lot of instances of teams escaping these close road wins, and I don't think that should be a blemish on BYU's resume if it isn't for Alabama's resume. But I think that, I don't know, they've looked good the last few weeks against Utah, Iowa State. If they lose this game by a good amount, I don't know where I'd have to see other results. I'd hope they'd probably be around like 10 or so, because Texas Tech's that good of a team. They have the number 1 point differential this year. They're pounding teams. They look like a completely different team when Baron Morton's there and healthy as a starter. So, I mean, Texas Tech, they've won every game by at least 23 points this year, and that's just what they do. They're the portal all-star team. They built a very good team this offseason, and it's showing every single week. They have no holes in their game.
Folks, if you're having issues understanding what you're looking at, this is my top 25, and then what I do is to give myself some perspective, I line up all the wins, and it would make it actually easier for me if I lined them up in regards to the quality of wins. But anyway, I usually do it chronologically, but I've been veering toward doing it in order of the quality of the win and then the point differential of the game. And if you're looking at BYU, yeah, Utah has played so well, and they're such a solid football team that's an excellent win by BYU. It was at home. They win it by 3. Iowa State's 4-4 right now, I believe.
No, they're 5-4.
5-4. 5-4 for Iowa State. BYU wins that on the road by 2 touchdowns. Then it really falls off a cliff after that. Arizona State's decent. What are they? 4-3?
They're 6-3.
6-3 for Arizona. Okay.
Arizona or Arizona State?
Arizona.
Arizona's
BYU.
5-3. Arizona's 5-3.
Okay, 5-3 for Arizona, and BYU gets a win there. So I think their level of wins are obviously not extremely strong, but they are undefeated.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're going to suffer a similar fate to Georgia Tech did this week with your rankings, Mark. I mean, you plummeted them from all the way from 8 to 23.
23. I just, with one loss, I cannot justify them as having a better resume than a ton of 2-loss teams. Now, that's a very compacted, series of teams there, but the differential is not much there. But I just those other teams just play such better competition and perform well.
I agree. It's just this late in the season, it is startling. Even though I agree with you, to see a team drop that much.
Yeah, I think I had them at maybe 7, something in that range. They lost to NC State. What's NC State right now? 5-4.
Yes. NC State did beat Virginia. NC State had a weird schedule where they had so many 50-50 games at the beginning of the year, like ECU, Wake Forest, Duke. They were playing close games against everyone every week, and they all felt like 50-50 ball games.
Yeah, the Clemson win has obviously deteriorated to nothing. To beat Wake Forest, and they, had every opportunity to lose that game. The Colorado win is not impressive that they won in the last minute of the game. Georgia Tech best win is Duke.
Duke, by the way, currently favored to win the ACC, Mark.
Are they really favored to win the ACC?
Yes.
What's their remaining schedule? I know they have Virginia left. They should have North Carolina because they haven't played them. Let's see, UConn and Wake. Okay. And only UNC's on the road. Okay, I can see that. UConn's on the road too.
And based on the way the tiebreakers are in the AC, shout out to Rec Talk. If Virginia loses a game, despite the head-to-head wins they've got, it will not matter because you have to beat each and every team with the same amount of losses. So it does not matter that they beat Louisville head-to-head. They would be out because of how weak their strength of schedule within the ACC is. Same thing with Georgia Tech, by the way, over Louisville, Pitt, and Duke.
SMU's also in there.
And SMU.
SMU and Louisville will play upcoming soon, though.
Yeah, and so will Duke and Pitt. Mm-hmm. So 2 of those teams will be eliminated. But Virginia and Georgia Tech basically can't have a massive glob of 1-loss teams, is my point, because of how weak their strength of schedule within the ACC is this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, Daryl, before we let you go, do you have a rooting interest in any of this? Like, do you want to see the very best 12 teams in the playoff, or do you, grasp and embrace the quirkiness of this to try to see some crazy, weird scenario?
Why can't I get a bit of both? I want to see a bunch of 10-2, 11-1 ACC teams, and a bunch of 10-2, 9-3 SEC teams, and I want to see the committee just make a stance and say, this is where we're going to be, and this is the direction the sport is going to go in the future. That's what I want. Because it's one of these conferences has got to give us some fun, and it's looking like the ACC this year, since the Big 12 has decided just to be BYU, Texas Tech, Utah. So,
yeah, and if I know you have no issue with the Big 10, possibly with Oregon faltering, possibly only getting 2 teams in.
That's
Wouldn't
correct.
That be something?
The ACC most can't get as many as the Big 10, which would be a fascinating scenario. Fascinating. But anyway, Mark, I'll get going. Good rest of your show. And shout out to James Madison, man. Nobody's talking about them, but they're going to make the playoffs, Mark.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Daryl, appreciate you being here. All right, Steve, thanks for being here. You can catch Steve's work at Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty on SB Nation. So I got to admit that I've been phoning it in for weeks now with the American Conference, just assuming, and I've dissected it, but I just couldn't find a way. Now Daryl's throwing out James Madison, and I have considered them. that a American Conference team would not be the representative of the group of five, because I just looked at it and I thought, even if they cannibalize themselves, there's just no way that a team can win that conference with more than 2 losses. So I just figured that an 11-2 American Conference champion would have such a better resume, because as you well know, the conference has played so well outside the conference and so well against the power conference, to the extent that they've got a better record against the power conferences than the ACC does, as you well know. So kind of handicap the American Conference and what we're looking out for. And obviously we've got the huge game coming up this weekend with Tulane in Memphis, and also Texas San Antonio in the USF game that you're going to.
Yes, so there's 6 teams with 1 loss right now, which is kind of crazy, and that just shows how crowded the race is. So if you want to talk about disaster scenarios where the American doesn't make the CFP, I was wondering recently, an aside, if there's a disaster scenario where the ACC could miss it, where James Madison and an American team could be top 5 conference champions. It almost happened with the Big 12 last year. If Tulane didn't lose on Thanksgiving to Memphis, there was a scenario where Tulane might have been ranked ahead of like Arizona State or Iowa State going into that Big 12 championship, and Boise State was a 3 seed where the Big 12 almost missed. But disaster scenarios for the American where it could miss, I think Tulane right now Tulane is a tough resume because they beat Duke, who could contend for the ACC. As Daryl just said, Duke is in position to possibly win that conference, and Tulane beat them. Tulane also beat 5-win Northwestern. That's knocking on the door of bowl eligibility in the Big Ten right now. My problem with Tulane right now is they lost 45-10 to Ole Miss, and they just got the doors blown off them 48-26 to a very average UTSA team this year. UTSA's best win before that game was beating Colorado State. Beating Rice was UTSA's best win before beating Tulane. So that was a shocker there. So Tulane could go 10-2, win the conference championship, but they do have 2 blowouts on their resume. The other scenario is the team that nobody's talking about that I think has the tools to win the conference, and that's the East Carolina Pirates. ECU in week 1 had the worst imaginable first half against NC State. They were down, I think, 17-0, like in a snap of a finger in that game. Now, ECU beat NC State in the bowl game last year, and ECU woke up about halfway through the game and then completely outplayed NC State for the final 2.5 quarters of that game. And they fell 8 or 9 yards short of the game-tying touchdown. So that's a loss to NC State, which has several quality wins on a 5-4 resume. And then ECU lost to BYU at home game. BYU's undefeated. That's an acceptable loss. And then they had a 7-point loss to Tulane on the road in the final minute. But I think ECU, they host Memphis. That could be a winnable game for them. And the rest of their schedule, I think ECU could do pretty well against. And that is one team where they could make it at 9-3, 10-3. It would be if winning the conference championship, where the committee might rank James Madison higher with 1 loss. And I think they would rank James Madison higher with 1 loss.
So there you go. You just debunked my previous statement, because I have not looked and updated my thoughts on this after this past weekend's results, and had dismissed a few 1-loss teams, focused on obviously Memphis and South Florida and North Texas in the top of the conference, Navy and so forth, and Tulane. And yeah, East Carolina obviously already has 3 losses, so they would be a 10-3 conference champion that would get ousted probably by somebody else. There's also the Mountain West to consider, which is usually a major factor in all of this, but Boise State has obviously faltered. They're coming off a bad loss against Fresno State. San Diego State is the one undefeated team in the Mountain West, so they have the best shot, and they got the out of conference win against Cal looks really good for them, and again, just the 1 loss overall.
Yeah, 23-point loss to Washington State, especially after Wazoo just lost to Oregon State, isn't looking as good. I know Washington State challenged Ole Miss, Virginia, some of those ranked teams on the road, but I'm not really feeling the Mountain West. I think it's an American team or James Madison will probably end up in this playoff. But this is an intriguing race to end the year. I mean, Memphis-Tulane is going to be a big one on Friday. Memphis had that weird blemish against UAB where they lost Brendan Lewis in the 3rd quarter of that game. and they weren't able to come back on a goal line stand. But Memphis has shown to be a complete team otherwise. I think they've covered every single other spread this year besides UAB, so they're consistently surpassing the expectations this year. They have an 18-point comeback and a 14-point fourth quarter comeback against Arkansas and South Florida, respectively, which are two of their more marquee wins. And yeah, if Brendan Lewis is day-to-day right now for that Tulane game, so that's one thing to monitor going into Friday's matchup. And then Tulane's coming off a loss where they're probably pretty ticked off right now and ready to avenge Memphis, which beat them on Memphis won the road game on Thanksgiving last year in New Orleans, and now Tulane's looking to do the same thing Friday night in Memphis.
Yeah, the conference has done a remarkable job of backfilling since the losses of Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF to become pretty much as strong as it was, even with those schools. And Steve, I'll ask you this. You kind of laid out the scenarios of what could happen and why East Carolina's got an interesting path and a doable path to the conference championship. And again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams virtually tied for first place with one loss. So scenarios aside, since you already laid that out, I would have told you at the beginning of the year, without a strong knowledge that I have of the power conferences, a lesser knowledge of these teams, but that Memphis and Tulane had the best talent, that they were the best teams. And then South Florida obviously jumped out with the nice performances early in the season and caught people's attention. Is there a team, like, are these teams as close as they appear to be in the standings, or is there one team that you do think is a little bit better or maybe decidedly better than everybody else?
I mean, South Florida did lose to if Memphis didn't have the UAB loss, I would say just Memphis right now, if they were undefeated, would have a great resume because they beat South Florida head to head. Overall, just when I watch the teams right now, South Florida would be my pick. South Florida is incredibly physical on defense, which that's the biggest change from the previous years because Alex Golesh has always had that offense going. Very Tennessee-like offense, takes a lot of hype balls, concepts, and systems, runs at hyper speed, throws a lot of teams off, relies heavily on the deep ball in that game. And then Byron Brown is just an electrifying dual threat quarterback that makes the whole system go. I think South Florida is the most complete team in the conference. And they also I think SMU might be first and they're either second or third right now in takeaways. So that's another thing that the defense does well. Mac Harris and Jalen Schuler, elite linebacking combo that consistently just jars the ball loose or is in the right place at the right time against other teams. You saw that as soon as that Boise State game to kick off the year. So I would say, I think South Florida should be favored in all of their remaining games. Let's see, UTSA, Navy, UAB, and Rice. Yes. So I do think South Florida is probably the one that gets there, because Navy's defense I'm not trusting right now. Even when Navy was undefeated before this North Texas game this past weekend, they were giving up 30 points in all these wins. Wins over Air Force, wins over Florida Atlantic. Navy just kept giving up over 30 points. Temple, another one. So I don't trust Navy's defense against South Florida, so I think that should be a South Florida win on the road in Annapolis, and that's their toughest game remaining. So I would say I think they're a lock probably to make the championship. The other team I would say, not because I believe that they're one of the two best teams they might be, but North Texas is 8-1 with a remaining schedule of UAB, Rice, and Temple. North Texas looks destined to go 11-1 entering that conference championship game. And if Memphis slips up, Tulane slips up, ECU, North Texas is going to make that championship and get a rematch with South Florida. And North Texas's offense, they're number 2 in scoring right now. Drew Mestemaker, the quarterback, it's not just stats with him. He passes the eye test. If you watch him, he just makes pro-level NFL throws. His film is probably impressing so many scouts right now. And they have a true freshman running back, Caleb Hawkins, who just rushed for 197 yards and 4 touchdowns. Eric Morris, a Mike Leach disciple, I don't know how he keeps finding these freshman talents like Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins and building a dominant offense on this. They lost Chandler Morris, their star quarterback, to Virginia. They lose DT Sheffield, their star wide receiver, to Rutgers. Shane Porter, their starting running back, to Sam Houston. They were so good on the skill positions last year. They ranked 3rd in total offense, and they just replenished it with a new batch of talent. So North Texas, their offense can compete with so many teams, and I think that their schedule allows for them to make this conference championship.
Steve Helwick catches work at Underdog Dynasty, also Hustle Belt. They're both on SB Nation. And Steve's going to be covering the Texas San Antonio game at South Florida. That's the Saturday matchup. No. That's on
Thursday.
Friday. And then you got Tulane in Memphis.
No, I'm doing Thursday night. I will be in Tampa for South Florida UTSA. Then I will bus across the state to Orlando for UCF Houston, space game on Friday night. Big 12 matchup, former AAC matchup.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, Steve. Safe travels.
Mhm.
Enjoy the games. And thanks for the breakdown.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
All right. Steve does a great job. We've been calling on him for years to break down the group of five for us in particular. All right. As I start to sift through these games on Saturday, loving the matchup starting at noon with BYU and Texas Tech. We'll go in order here. We got Michael Hogue stopping by. Michael, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. In my answer to your homework question, Ohio State leads 26-25 and 1.
Leads what? 26-25 and 1.
You posted a YouTube short about Ohio State and Michigan. Your record in your lifetime?
Oh, since you've been born.
Yeah.
Got you. 26-20. It's only 26-25?
And 1 tie.
So that's 52 games. And may I ask you, since we can pretty much figure it out anyway, what year were you born?
71. I just remember somehow I'm missing a game somewhere in there.
Well, they didn't play in 2020.
Yeah, that's right. So it would be 50. It would be 53. I'm 54, so
25. Oh, wow. That's kind of close.
Yep.
All right. Actually, your record's a little bit off because they tied in 1973. They also tied in 1992. So there are two ties.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it's 26-24 and 2 would be my guess, but you might want to go back through that. But so you caught our short. I don't know when I produced that, maybe 6 months ago. Yeah, asking people for the series record since they were born. Yes, thank you for that.
Nice.
You can go back and add up the IU, Purdue, Old Oak, and Bucket since you were born.
No, that's roughly Purdue by like almost 2-1 margin.
Yeah.
Not 3-1 margin.
Yep.
Anyway, got a question for you. Is it possible? First of all, I don't think James Madison's gonna make the playoffs this year to shoot the reels down. And Reels, stop hating on the Big Ten, please, before I can give the kiss of death to the SEC again, like I did last year. But that's just between me and Darrell. Anyway, you and Steve was saying Navy. I haven't had a chance to see Navy yet this year, but with their offense, like how they control time with their running and stuff like that, could that limit South Florida?
Well, sure. They play a style of offense that they keep the ball. The time of possession always swings in favor of a good academy team.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and that's one thing you won against Byron Brown and the South Florida offense.
Yeah, because I was just looking. They still got Notre Dame Saturday, the South Florida, Memphis, and then, of course, the Army-Navy game, which I highly recommend. If anybody can ever get there, to either to Annapolis or Philadelphia, go, because it's an experience you'll never forget. And I don't know, have you ever been there for an Army-Navy game, Mark?
Well, it's funny that you say that because my last year at ESPN, I actually had the opportunity to go, and that was as an ESPN employee because the guy, one of the guys that was on my team, quote unquote team, that I was his supervisor, ran the audio for College Game Day, and he asked me to come down. And sometimes if I just feel like something's just going to be too much of a hassle, I just say no thank you. So I did not go to the Army-Navy game, which I would have had, pretty royal treatment, out at the production truck and, been able to probably stand on the sideline and the whole deal. But I did not go to answer your question.
I hope sometime you get to experience it.
Yes, that would be awesome. I do. When we start to rank rivalries, I don't even rank that one because I think it's just special and it's completely different than all the other ones.
Yeah. Another thing I'm trying to figure out, This is a good point, though. It is possible that the Big Ten could only get 2 teams this year with Indiana
Yes.
and Ohio State.
It is
But it is
quite possible.
But is there a possibility they can get 4 teams in?
Sure, but it's more possible that only 2 get in.
Okay.
That would
If-
be a bad year for the Big Ten to only get 2 teams in the college football playoff. It would be unfathomable.
But who do you think has a better chance of getting more than 2 teams in? The SEC? I mean, I scratch that. The ACC or the Big 12?
Oh, the ACC does.
How many could they get possibly?
Well, they've got that lineup of teams the Miami loss to SMU hurts the ACC. So Miami's pretty much done. And the ACC is going to be helped in terms of numbers of teams getting in if Duke is able to get into the championship game and win it. And as we just talked about in the previous discussion, Duke has actually the easiest path to the ACC championship game. So Duke is going to be a 3-loss team. They could win the ACC, and we could still see, let's say, that would knock out Virginia because Virginia plays Duke. That would be a second loss for Virginia. It would be, let's say, Duke and Georgia Tech would make the playoff. But Georgia Tech, having lost on Saturday, I'm starting to argue against myself. They've already lost this first game, and that would be a second game in the championship game. Really, the ACC's best shot is to have Georgia Tech and Louisville run the table and wipe out the other teams and just have those 2 play in the conference championship game and both get into the playoff at 12-1 and 11-2.
Yeah, who would you go with in the ACC championship if it was Louisville or Georgia Tech?
I would go right now with Louisville. I think they're playing better football. They're on a tear right now.
Yeah, okay. No, did Georgia Tech just have a bad game Saturday?
They must have really had a bad game. I did not see any of it. I'd like to go back and check it out. They gave up 48 points to NC State.
Yeah, and NC State's not that good of a team this year, are they?
They're 5-4 in the ACC. So the answer is no. They're not very good.
Okay. And I was looking on your schedule, the things of for the games that was listed this week, and I guess the big new kickoff is going to be in Happy Valley for Penn State,
with
Indiana.
Penn State. Yep.
Yeah, and I wonder how ugly that might be.
How ugly it could be. Yeah, well, the way Indiana's playing against everyone, my goodness, it could be quite ugly. Let's see what Vegas has to say about that.
I seen it. Someone said around like 14.
14.5. Okay, that seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of the game with Maryland you seen Saturday. Did you?
I saw enough of it. Let me tell you that I watched. I produced a recap on it. I watched it from the beginning and saw that Maryland outplayed them for about 4 minutes, and then after that, Indiana just completely just dominated the game. Ran for 370 yards.
Yeah.
They just looked phenomenal, as they have all season.
Yeah.
They look like the best team in the country.
So is Ohio State on a bye week this week?
They play Purdue. Yes.
Oh,
to
wait a
answer
minute.
your question.
Yeah, basically it is a bye week. Sorry, I'm having a brain freeze. I forgot about
I
it.
thought you were setting me up for that one.
No, actually, it would be nice if it came back to 2018 all over again, but I don't know. But one other thing is, how come they picked the 1:00 kickoff for that?
That is kind of strange. It's on the Big Ten Network. The only thing I'm thinking there is that they obviously don't have a second game. They don't have a double header. That must be the only day game they have. So, as you well know, the time slots are typically noon Eastern and then 3:30 for all the networks. They all do the same exact thing and have for years and years and years and years. But the Big Ten Network obviously does not have a second game in the afternoon. So they moved that back for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm sure. And when was the last time you seen a college football game kickoff at 1:00?
Well, it's funny because seconds before you said that, I hearkened back to a day in which probably only some of our viewers and listeners remember, but there used to be Big Ten games kickoff all over the place at 1:00, like in the 80s
I can remember.
before
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
TV regulated all of that. They would either have 1 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. kickoffs at Ohio Stadium all the time. For whatever reason, I don't know when Ohio State and Michigan went to noon Eastern time, because now it seems like, well, Ohio State and Michigan just play the noontime slot, and that's always going to be what it is. But that's in line with all the other TV games. But no, it's always been at noon, even when the other games all started at 1:00 in the afternoon. It was just kind of strange. So I don't know when that tradition started with noon for Ohio State, Michigan. And I'm guessing, I would say sometime in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I'm starting to remember all these ABC regional games starting, where they would have a crazy map, if you remember, where it's not like now where they just show a game. They would try to consolidate the offense or the audience so much, and they would try to maximize the audience so much. They would do like 6 games at 3:30, and they do the NC State Wake game, and only like a little cluster in North Carolina would see that game. And then they'd have the Ohio State Wisconsin game, and most of the Midwest would see that. Then they'd have an Alabama, Texas A&M game, or as a bad example, they weren't in the SEC, an Alabama Arkansas game, and that would be, and they'd have all these regional games, and they did away with that at some point here in the last maybe 15 to 20 years, and just decided that, well, I think it's with the proliferation of all these other networks, having ESPN2, ESPNU, the SEC network, the ACC network, that they can spread all these, and all these other networks are doing games, and Fox gets into the action, so they don't have to. They can still show all these games, but give them their own network.
Yeah. Oh, the Big Ten is doing a doubleheader Saturday, but it's just a 4:30 kickoff for Washington and Wisconsin. So they are doing a 4th doubleheader. I think they're maybe doing the volleyball or maybe hockey, basketball Saturday night too. It is basketball season, so. But no, I was just remembering. But I wonder. I keep thinking back with Michigan and Ohio State. Well, you've always been on Eastern time zone. Indiana didn't used to be on Eastern until the time change. But I can remember a few times growing up as a kid, 11 o'clock Ohio State and Michigan, which would have been a new kickoff. And like in Ohio and everywhere else.
They've always kicked off at noon.
Yeah.
And when I say always, I mean during my lifetime. I don't know when that started. I may actually look that up to see the first year they did that.
I'm sure Keith Jackson had something to do with it. But anyway,
Jackson had something to do with the Ohio State Michigan kickoff time.
Yeah, I'm just so Keith was a great guy. But no, I remember a few times they played at 3:30. I think the last time was what, 2006?
One time.
What was that, 2006?
Yes.
But
why, I don't know. I don't understand, but they did it. I thought it was stupid then. I think it's stupid now. I don't know why they did it once. To make any difference. But
now, do you ever think they'll go prime time?
No, I hope not.
Just as wondering and stuff like that. Because I can remember
they get the largest audience in the sport at noon.
I was just wondering, like I said, we talked about. I can remember times where back in the 80s when Mark Herman was up at Purdue and stuff like that, they had to go like to Michigan and play like a 1:30 kickoff on like ABC a few times. Also, the 1 o'clock time frame for most of their games and stuff like that. But no, with the proliferation of TV and stuff like that. So, but no, I was just wondering something. Like that. All right, sir. I know time's running short, and I think you might have a few other callers. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Michael. Have a good one.
Yeah, me too. See ya.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got 14 minutes left in the show, unless you want to keep me around. So that's up to you. We got David stopping by. David, what's going on?
Hello, Mark. I would have been interested to kind of do a breakdown of the playoff situation scenarios per a conference, kind of what me and Darrell got into last week. By the way, I do want to say I regret saying that I was trying to give Miami so much love a few weeks back. And I want to take back all that love that I was trying to give them a few back. Remember when I asked you, just how good Miami was a few weeks back? And I said, and you said, oh, I think they're really good, and they were at that particular period of time. And I think Carson Beck has morphed into being Georgia Carson Beck again.
Well, depending on when at Georgia he would be.
Well, the 2024 version of Carson Beck, not the 2023 version of Carson Beck, when he was throwing the ball to the other team, as he did a couple times, this past weekend.
Yes, he is not playing well. That's for sure.
Yeah, I have to say this with the conferences and what we're looking at here going forward. Kind of let me throw some situation scenarios out to you, okay? So, Big 12. The chance of the Big 12 getting 2 teams seems to be get an undefeated BYU to the title game, with their win over Cincinnati, with their win over Texas Tech.
Yeah.
And have whatever 2-loss team beat them in the Big 12 title game, meaning that BYU, you would think, as a 12-1 football team, would have enough wins, and then the 2-loss team would get the automatic bid.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
So that's the path for 2 Big 12 teams making the college football playoff.
Yes. So BYU, cleans the table. So Texas Tech is going to be a 7-2 conference team. They're going to be 10-2 overall. Right. Texas Tech or Cincinnati, we don't know what the breakdown of that tiebreaker would be, but it appears pretty clear. Well, it would be, because one of them has to make the championship game. So they're going to win their games to get there. So it's going to be BYU against Texas Tech or Cincinnati under your scenario. I'm not saying that these other teams are out of it, but I'm saying under this scenario. And then, Cincinnati or Texas Tech wins the Big 12 championship game against BYU.
Right, exactly. So, by the way, BYU gets Texas Tech and they get Cincinnati, before the end of the season here. So, So
okay.
that's why I was wondering about your title game pick there, because if you look at the standings,
well, it's impossible to figure it out. We could have like 4 7-2 teams.
It's a little bit of a process of elimination, because if you take a look at the particular standings in the Big 12, if they would give Texas Tech their second conference loss, and Cincinnati their second conference loss, so you're going to have a log jam of teams with 2 conference losses. Boy, it's going to be really interesting to see how those tiebreakers break down, by the way.
Do you have are you looking at the standings just like I am, or are you looking at schedules?
Well, no, I'm just looking at the overall standings. I had not pulled up the schedules as of yet, because it's essentially Tech and Cincinnati both have 1 loss within the conference. If BYU gives Texas Tech their second conference loss and gives Cincinnati their second conference loss, you would have a log jam of teams with 2 conference losses.
Yes, to some degree. Now, obviously, a lot of these teams are going to play each other.
Right.
So who else does Texas Tech play? They've got...
they've got BYU,
UCF, and West Virginia.
Right.
So it's not hard to surmise that they should win the rest of those games. So let's say Texas Tech is in the clubhouse at 7-2.
Right. And we know that Texas Tech, sorry, did they get Cincinnati earlier in the year? I don't think yes, they did beat Cincinnati earlier. Oh no, they did not.
No.
They did not. I'm sorry.
So Cincinnati just lost its first conference game against Utah.
Right.
So Cincinnati has Arizona, BYU, and TCU. They lose the BYU game. Let's say they beat Arizona and TCU. They're 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got Houston. I can find all these.
Well, Houston could knock out TCU, who has 2 conference losses.
Okay.
And then they've got UCF and Baylor.
Okay.
What might be detrimental to Houston was this loss this past week to West Virginia.
Well, sure.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
Okay. So again, we're not doing this thinking that Houston's a really good football team. They're going to win these games. We're just playing out a scenario.
Situation scenarios, yes.
Houston, let's say Houston sweeps. So they're 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
That would have knocked out TCU because that's one of the wins.
Right.
Now we move on to Utah. I'm looking at Utah, and they've got UCF, TCU, and Baylor.
Yep.
So if they sweep, they're 7-2.
Right.
Then we got Arizona State, and if they've got
West Virginia, Colorado,
Arizona. They could
Right.
sweep.
Yep.
And okay, we're done with the 2 lost teams. So the only team that gets eliminated is TCU.
Right.
And
So
we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7-2 teams.
Yeah, trying to compete to play BYU in the title.
Awesome. That's what I want.
See, I was going to try to give Mark Rogers what he loved in this world most,
Yes.
which is chaos. And if you want some chaos in the Big 12, I serve it up to you, Mark Rogers. There you go.
That's it right there. I'm sure we could get a different type of chaos if we have BYU get knocked off.
Sure.
But obviously the conversation started with you trying to get 2 teams in from the Big 12.
That's right.
But if we wanted chaos within the conference, we get BYU knocked off, and we could create, although that's only going to create a 3-way tie between those 3. I like this route better with the 5-way tie for second.
Yeah, all looking to try to get to Jerry World to play BYU for the Big 12 title.
Yeah.
So I think that's very interesting, by the way. That'll come down to like 10 zillion tiebreakers, and maybe they might have to flip quarters and stuff like that. I don't know, Mark. But then the ACC I find to be interesting too. Bad loss this week for Georgia Tech. I thought maybe a path would be, again, you get an undefeated Georgia Tech to the ACC title game. 1 loss team knocks out Georgia Tech, and that's maybe the path to 2 teams getting in for the ACC. The more and more I think about it, I don't know, Mark, are you still at the point that the ACC only gets 1 team in, or what do you think?
I didn't think that a week ago. Now, a week ago, we were looking at a crazy
2.
scenario to try to shoehorn 4 teams in from the ACC. But if you recall, David, the conversation we had when we were looking at these quote unquote easy schedules for these ACC contenders, and I said, none of them are that good where you can look at these stretches of schedule and say, oh, they're just going to win these games. So
Right.
Georgia Tech goes out and loses to NC State. Miami goes out and loses to SMU. Now, I think we are suddenly in a place where what is most likely is the champion of the ACC gets in.
Right.
The most if we want to paint the best scenario for the ACC, then I think we're looking for the 2 best teams just to get to the championship game.
Well, see, I think Louisville's going 11-1. I do. I think they can beat Cal, or I think they can beat Cal, Clemson, SMU, and Kentucky.
Sure.
Okay, so if they go 11, now they might not even play in the ACC title game because they lose the tiebreaker to Virginia.
Sure.
And now I don't know why, but I'm looking on this and it says Virginia was undefeated in the conference, which isn't true because their only loss was to NC State.
That was a non-conference game. It's a
Virginia's
non-conference game.
Was to NC State.
Yes.
How does that?
They scheduled NC State as a non-conference game.
Gosh, that is so. Them doing that gives them a leg up because they have an undefeated
Yeah,
conference
they're
record.
undefeated. Yes.
Wow, that is just wow.
That's been done several times.
Okay, so that scheduling quirk
Yep.
could, with Virginia's rest of the schedule, Wake Forest, Duke, and Virginia Tech, get them to 11-1. Wow.
The problem with the ACC is Georgia Tech losing, and they cannot get two teams to one loss. They cannot
Mhm.
keep two teams with one loss now.
Yeah.
They had that opportunity before, and then they had the opportunity of teams not making the conference championship game, and they still do with one loss. But their championship game loser is going to have two losses.
Well, see, okay.
So they're
Georgia
going to
Tech,
get knocked. They're going to get displaced by a Big Ten team or an AC or an SEC team that's 10-2.
I'm getting to the Big Ten and the SEC in a second. The thing with Georgia Tech is still has a very Georgia Tech's path is its last two games, which are Pitt and Georgia. If they win those two games and finish 11-1 with a win over Georgia, that's pretty powerful still.
Yeah, that would actually be the best thing for the ACC. I think you just uncovered it. Georgia
Yes.
Tech goes 11-1, but they don't go to the conference championship game.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Then Louisville would probably take that spot because Pitt, who has one conference loss, would get knocked out by them losing to Georgia Tech.
Yeah, the ACC doesn't want its two best teams to play in the conference championship game. They want to protect one of them, leave them out of the game.
Right.
Not that they have control over it, obviously, but have Duke win the conference.
Yeah, they're still right. Darrell was talking about Duke earlier, and but Duke's still got to play Virginia, so I don't know if that's happening. No, but I mean,
where's that game? Not that it really matters with those.
Well, it's at Duke.
Yeah, it's at Duke. I bet Duke's going to be a field goal favorite.
Duke's going to be a field goal favorite over the number 12 team in the country?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, they've had some interesting games this year.
Duke was a favorite against Georgia Tech when they played. Like 1.5. So we sized this up in the Big 12. We could do the same thing here.
Yes.
If Duke or whomever knocks off Virginia, we could have 3. So we've got a possible 6-way tie. Obviously, some of these teams play.
Okay. See, situation scenario here. The Big Ten and the SEC and Notre Dame do not want to see multiple ACC or multiple Big 12 teams get in. That really puts a fly in the ointment here, right, Mark?
Yes.
Because here's the thing. I want to get to the Big Ten. Let me get to the SEC first.
We may hold on for the Big Ten and the SEC for another night.
Okay. Well, can I be brief? I know you're. We got a lot of situations and scenarios we got to get to here, Mark. Come on now.
We're going to do it in about a minute.
Okay, I'm going to try it. I'll try to wrap it up as quickly as I can here. We're trying to solve the college football playoff inside of 2 minutes here, ladies and gentlemen. But all right, Oregon. I still think a 10-2 Oregon gets in. By the way, because if Oregon beats Iowa, beats a 9-2 Washington team, even if they were to lose to USC or maybe lose to Iowa, I still think a 10-2 Oregon gets in. Darrell disagreed with me. He believed that they had to get to 11-1. I still think a 10-2 Oregon team gets in. What are your thoughts?
I can't have complete thoughts on that because I'd have to line up the SEC teams that would be 10-2. I think just about any SEC team got a better resume than Oregon's 10-2. Oregon's going to have a win against Iowa.
Yep.
Okay, so who is Oregon losing to?
All right, let's say they beat what ends up being a 9-3 USC team. And ends up being a 9-3 Washington team and loses at Iowa.
Okay. Oregon loses to Iowa. They've lost to Iowa and Indiana. They've got wins against Washington, USC. Anybody else any good?
That's where
No.
right. But here's the thing, though. Here's what I think that's going to happen in the SEC. Again, I know we're running a little bit on the time here. I'm going to try and wrap this up as quickly as I can. I think right now, I think the SEC is at 4 teams because here's the deal. I think it's Georgia. I think it's Alabama. I think it's A&M, and I think it's Ole Miss. I think that Oklahoma is going to lose a third game, and Texas is going to lose a third game, and I think Vanderbilt's going to lose a third game, and Tennessee's already going to lose a third game. So I think now the question is, are you going to take a 9-3 team over them? There's a question that's up for some debate there.
I think Oklahoma's 9-3 is certainly a better resume than Oregon's 10-2.
You could make that case, but that would be interesting to see if better record, that schedule worse record trumps that better record.
I am with you, David.
I don't know, just some food for thought, Mark. I know that I know we're running a little bit on time here, but
Well, everybody, we've got David. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll chop it up later this week.
All right, we're on 10 o'clock still.
We're going to be on during the playoff rankings.
Oh, okay. Going live during the playoff rankings.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, college football playoff rankings released on Tuesday night. I don't know when that is, but we will be live directly after. We are running very long tonight. Got to respect the time. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I don't know when the rankings are revealed, but as soon as they are revealed, we will be here live with all of you, taking your calls and questions, comments, and the like right here at the Voice of College Football.